So this morning we continue with the I am statements of Jesus. Those of you who were here last week will remember turning to John 10 at the beginning to look at the statement, I am the door. A bit further on, Jesus also mentioned that he is the shepherd. More specifically, he says, I am the good shepherd. Worry, anxiety, and fear too easily crop up in my mind, my life, and if you've had a week like mine, then you will understand. I think the majority of problems in the Christian life stem from us not reflecting, pondering, and resting on Christ as our good shepherd. This morning, I want to look first at the background into this imagery in the Old Testament. Then I want to look at three ways in which Jesus shows us that he is the good shepherd. For he knows his sheep, and he protects his sheep, and provides for his sheep. Sheep and shepherds are a large part of the Mediterranean world, and were especially so in biblical times. In a sense, they're kind of like cars to us. I know that you don't ride in a sheep or eat a car, but as you know, you will probably know where I'm going with this. They were everywhere. You know them and you live with them. And sheep were everywhere in the Eastern world. Sheep and shepherding were common themes in the lives of the Old Testament. Characters like Isaac, Jacob, Joseph and his brothers, David and his brothers, the sons of Jesse, were all shepherds among the long list of others. Sheep were everywhere. They were important for sustenance as the main source of meat, though only rich people could afford to eat sheep regularly. We're told that Solomon was so rich, he had 100 sheep and 100 goats to eat at his banqueting table every day. Sheep weren't just eaten, but were also used as common sacrifices under the Levitical law. God commanded that the firstborn of every flock were to be offered to him as a tithe and a sacrifice. And sheep were the primary animal used for burnt offerings, peace offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. You will also remember that on the high feast day of Passover, a family would gather in their home, sit down, and consume a sheep together. Sheep weren't just eaten and sacrificed, but were there for all kinds of uses. Sheepskin was turned into containers for wine and water, clothing, coverings, parchments to write on. Sheep bones and horns were made into writing utensils. Sheep were everywhere. They were part of life. The Jews who were listening to Jesus would have known immediately what he meant when he spoke of sheep and a shepherd. If I said teacher, nurse, police officer, different images pop into your mind with different characteristics that mark each profession. You know them. And so it was for those Jews when hearing about sheep and shepherds. Therefore, it's not so strange when God uses the metaphor of a sheep and a shepherd in reference to his people and himself throughout the Old Testament. Jesus didn't just do this out of the blue. Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament scriptures, did this time and time again. And any Jewish man or woman listening to Jesus here would have probably had these scriptures going through in his mind. They would have thought of Psalm 23, and they probably would have known it better than what we do. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Or perhaps they would have thought of Micah chapter 2. I will surely assemble all of you, O Jacob. I will gather the remnant of Israel. I will set them together like sheep in a fold, like a flock in its pasture, a noisy multitude of men. He who opens the breach goes up before them. They break through and pass the gate, going out by it. Their king passes on before them, the Lord at their head. Or perhaps Ezekiel came to your mind. And I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. And I will feed them on the mountains of Israel, by the ravines and all the inhabited places of the country. I will feed them with good pasture, and on the mountain heights of Israel shall be their grazing land. They shall lie down in good grazing land, and on rich pasture they shall feed on the mountains of Israel. I myself will be their shepherd, and I myself will make them lie down, declares the Lord. I will be your shepherd, declares Yahweh. Now, Jesus says the same thing twice. I am the good shepherd, raises the language of God in the title of God. But not just the title of God, but the very name of God himself. The good shepherd, I am, is how a Jew would have heard Jesus. Time and time again, Jesus identifies himself with Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, the one and only true God. The Jewish people understand him in this. In verse 20, they're debating whether he's insane or has a demon. That's what you do when someone claims to be God. But Jesus is the fulfillment of all the shepherd texts. He is the God in the flesh, coming to gather his people like a shepherd and shepherd them for all eternity. What makes Jesus the good shepherd? He gives us 3 reasons in this text. He knows his sheep, he protects his sheep, he provides for his sheep. You see, the good shepherd knows his sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Should I probably read more about shepherds this week than you will do in a lifetime? And I have found it really interesting. One of the most interesting things about the shepherds in the ancient world is that when they would gather all the sheep together in sheepfolds, and especially when they're in a communal area, which is not in the town, it's out in the hills and the valleys, multiple shepherds would gather their sheep within a common sheepfold. Now, you remember last week, Roy telling us that a sheepfold was a circular rock barrier, and it was high enough so the sheep couldn't jump out of it. And just to make sure they couldn't do that, brambles would be placed on the top of those rocks so that not only could the sheep not get out, but thieves could also not get in. The shepherd, as we heard last week, would serve as the door. He would lay there in one opening of that sheepfold so that no one could get out or no one could get in. In a communal area, multiple flocks might spend the night together in one sheepfold. Now, the problem rises in the morning because you need to separate the sheep. You see, they're separate flocks with separate shepherds who each need to take their sheep on their own way. Now, this is what blew my mind. Often a shepherd would just speak or whistle or sing, and the sheep responded to that shepherd's voice. They would all come out and follow their own shepherd. Do you see? He knows his sheep, and his sheep know his voice. That's why Jesus says in verse 3, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by his name and leads them out. They know him, and he equally knows them. In Ezekiel 34, it says, the Lord is the great shepherd who will seek the lost, and I will bring out the strayed, and I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak. He knows his sheep. He knows their condition, whether they're lost, straying, injured, or weak. I'm going off script. I've spoken about this before. When I went to Israel, I came back with this. And you see a shepherd with a sheep on his shoulders. And you're thinking, why is the sheep on the shoulders of the shepherd? Could it be this is the sheep that got lost and the shepherd went out and rescued the lost sheep? Yes. But why is the sheep on the shoulders? It's because the sheep has got a broken leg. But the question is, why has the sheep got a broken leg? The shocking answer is the shepherd broke the sheep's leg. Why would he do that? This was the sheep that kept going astray. So the shepherd had to teach the sheep a lesson. He broke the sheep's leg so that for the next 6 weeks, the shepherd would have to care for the sheep. He would have to feed the sheep, water the sheep, carry the sheep. At night time, where would the sheep sleep? At the foot of the shepherd. After the 6 weeks, when the leg had recovered, where was the sheep? Always at the feet of the shepherd. That's an analogy for us to remain close to the shepherd. You see, the knowledge of the shepherd over the sheep means that he's able to give the right care. He knows which sheep are prone to wander, so he sets 2 eyes on them. He knows which sheep are sluggish, so he prods them. He knows which sheep are weak and treats them more gently. There's great comfort in this. The better a shepherd knows his flock, the better he can care for it. ABC family, listen to this. Jesus knows you. I doubt that any of you have ever been shepherds, but many of you have come close to that. You are parents. As a parent, you know your children. And children are all the same in some ways. They will all have your love. And they're all, forgive me, little sinners like sheep going astray. But they're also uniquely different. You can correct one child with a look. But with another, the child isn't fazed at all. Some are tender. Some are stubborn. Some are hurting. Some never seem to get hurt. You see, all the knowledge that you have about them allows you to parent them better. Christ, as the Good Shepherd, knows his sheep thoroughly. There's nothing about you that he does not know. From the greatest to the slightest, from the most obvious, what you think is the most hidden. He knows it all. In fact, he knows you better than you know yourself. If you think about this congregation, as a pastor and a under-shepherd of this church, there are more than 120 of you who will show up in this room on Sunday mornings, not necessarily all the same time. And as much as I would like to know all of you, I don't. I try. And if I'm honest, I don't even know all of your names. But know this, I would like to get to know you better. Simply because I don't know everything about you. And I don't know every way that I should care for you, pray for you, or teach you as a pastor and a shepherd of this church, though I long to. You see, this is where I find great comfort as a pastor. Christ knows everything about you. He is the good shepherd of his church, of this church. He cares for our souls. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows and he will respond in kindness. But did you notice what this passage specifically notes that he knows about us? He knows our weakness and our vulnerability. You know, here's what I know from experience, both as a Christian and as a pastor. The great issue is not believing that Jesus is the good shepherd, but that we are weak sheep who need a good shepherd. But this is also what he knows. Often we want to hide what we truly are thinking from others, because we know that we are weak and frail. We know what we look like on the inside, and we like to keep that from others and put a cover on it. I think about Psalm 39, where David said, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, you know it already." In many ways, that is a frightful thought, if it was not for what follows. David continues, "You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it." Who else would we want to know us but the one who promises to be with us, to hem us in before and behind, to safeguard us and to minister to us in our weakness? Wherever we go, Christ is with us. He surrounds us. He never abandons us because he knows us. He knows that we are weak and that we need the good shepherd. You see, the good shepherd does not break the bruised reed or quench the smoldering wick. He knows our frame. He knows that we are but dust. He gently cares for us and deals with us according to our need. Jesus says that he knows us. And we know him just as the Father knows him and he knows the Father. That should break our tiny minds. Think about the knowledge that the Son has of the Father, and the Father has of him. How deep and wide and high it is. They have belonged to one another for all of eternity, enjoying one another, delighting in one another, and dwelling with one another as one. Yet Jesus says that his knowledge of us and our knowledge of him is at least comparable to the knowledge of the Father for the Son, or for the Son of the Father. Isn't that amazing? We all belong to him, and he to us. It seems to be too great a promise. How can we be sure that Jesus is this kind of shepherd? Do you know the answer is found multiple times in this passage? Verse 11 says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and my own sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay my life down for the sheep. Verse 17, for this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. As the Good Shepherd, he showed what lengths he would go to for the eternal protection of his sheep. This is the Good Shepherd who protects his sheep with his very life. This is our ironclad guarantee. He proved himself in the costliest of ways. He knew our greatest need. Of course, what we saw last week is in the background. Jesus is condemning false shepherds, who are in fact thieves and robbers. He is the good shepherd in contrast to the religious leaders of that day, who instead of protecting and caring for the flock, were destroying them. In this passage, Jesus compares them to a hireling shepherd, a shepherd who was hired by another shepherd. It was not uncommon for a shepherd to hire other shepherds to help him manage his sheep. A good shepherd could possibly manage 500 sheep in a pasture by himself. But if he had more than that, he had to have hired help. Even if he didn't have that many sheep, he would probably hire other shepherds to help him, because he couldn't watch those sheep around the clock all day, every day. Shepherds needed rest, because it wasn't an easy life. They were on call all the time. They were responsible for making sure the sheep were well fed, the pasture was adequate, and not overgrazed. They had to keep sheep, their flock, within a 20-mile radius of water during the winter, or within 10 miles during the arid, dry months. They had to lead them from pasture to pasture, find their wounds, find the ones that went astray, separate the sheep from fighting with one another, and most importantly, as Jesus is addressing here, protect the sheep from outside threats. David gives us a picture of this in 1 Samuel 17. Do you remember that when he went out to fight Goliath, he said he had no fear over this big, bad, ugly bruiser, because, he says, I've killed lions and bears while protecting my father's flocks. But a hireling, a hired hand, a shepherd who has no personal interest in the sheep, flees when the wolf comes, when the sheep needs their protection. So the wolf snatches some of the sheep and scatters others. So why does the hireling flee? It's not because he doesn't respect the financial worth of the sheep. You see, he would have been penalized by the main shepherd for the losses of the flock that occurred during his watch. It's also not because he's wicked. Thieves and robbers in this text are the ones who are wicked. He would rather preserve his own life than lose it for a few sheep. Those sheep weren't his. Hired hands run because the sheep don't belong to them. They're not theirs. Jesus says he is the good shepherd who lays his life down for his sheep. He dies for them because they are his. The good shepherd protects his sheep. Think about this. If a shepherd dies, the flock is abandoned to the darkness. There is nothing left to protect them. It's not good if the shepherd dies. But Jesus, as the good shepherd, knows that if he does not die, his flock will be abandoned to the darkness. He allows himself to be devoured so that we might live. That's the good shepherd. Make no mistake, it was his knowledge of what was needed and his willingness to meet the need that led to his death. This was no accidental death. Jesus says in both verses 11 and 14, I lay myself down for my sheep. The shepherd may be willing to lay his life down for the sheep, but Jesus doesn't just say that he's willing. He's planning and pursuing it. It wasn't the power of the wolf, it was the authority of the Son that leads him to lay down his life so that he might take it up again for us. As we will see next week with Mike, he is the resurrection and the life. It will be his and only his choice. He says it emphatically in this passage. In the Greek, he says, I myself lay down my life of myself. This isn't the speech of a martyr. He's not forced to his death by the powers of darkness, but yields himself that he might conquer them to protect us. He knew that our life required his death and that our death required his life. That's the good shepherd. Here is a shepherd who loves his sheep more than his own life. It's why the writer of the Hebrews, speaking about his shed blood, says that he is the great shepherd of the sheep. Who could ever doubt it? The good shepherd provides for his sheep. Think of the last verse of Psalm 23. The context is that the Lord is our shepherd. The final statement begins with, surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our life. Surely, it's guaranteed. He provides goodness, the Lord's blessing and forgiveness, and mercy to us. They shall be the possession of the sheep all the days of their lives. These two graces follow the sheep wherever they go. Do you think that he doesn't know what you need? Or that he can't provide this or that? Or that he doesn't know this? Whatever it is, we begin to worry or fret. That is why in the scripture, it speaks so many times of us not being anxious or afraid. Jesus gives us so many more So many lessons along these lines. When he's giving the Sermon on the Mount to all the gathered sheep laying in the grass, he reminds them, be anxious about nothing. Don't worry about what you'll eat or wear tomorrow. Lord, the Father, clothes the grass of the fields. He feeds the sparrows. He provides. Think about the feeding of the 5,000. 5,000 people are gathered before him. The picture is very much Psalm 23-ish. They are laying on the green grass, receiving the word. He is preaching to them and watching over them. The disciples come up anxiously, worrying, wondering perhaps, what are we going to feed all these people? We need to send them away. Jesus provides the food that they need, as if they're going to starve for just missing one meal. He still provides. He provides time and time again. There isn't a Christian in this room or in this world who cannot testify to that. He desires for his sheep to lay down and rest in green pastures. It's good for us to remind ourselves of that. Do you allow yourself to rest at the shepherd's feet? Do you know him as the Good Shepherd? You see, he knows you through and through, and yet he still loves, protects, and provides. He's provided for you. He protects you. You can rest. You can lay down in the green pastures and allow him to restore your soul. Goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life, on into eternity, forever and ever. He is the Good Shepherd. His voice is worth listening to. He is worth following. Will you? Amen.